Well, we knew it had to come to this someday. I reached a block of what I would call utility games. Games that every console library needs in order to round things out. But because every console has some version of them, there generally isn't much interest in going back to the old ones. I'm talking about things like sports games and traditional board games. If you were buying PC Engine games in 1988, you might actually want them because they'll give you something you didn't have. Almost 4 decades later? And why would you play that particular version when there's literally hundreds of other options for the exact same game? Now, for the most part, I take a live and let live attitude towards these titles. I might not enjoy playing the baseball games, but I can recognize that there's a reason they exist. But there is one genre that I truly hate. One genre that I'd prefer it if we could erase it from existence. In Japanese, it's called Sugoroku. And Yuuyuu Jinsei is the PC Engine's first Sugoroku game. The term Sugoroku derives from the dice used to play it. And it's a style of board game that is extremely old and found all over the world. In the game, you roll the dice or use some other randomizer to determine how many spaces you move, and then the space that you land on gives you some event that usually makes you gain or lose some money, points, whatever is being used for that game. This is the nadir of game design. One of the most important things in game design is that players have to make meaningful choices that directly affect the outcome of the game. When it comes to video games, these choices are being made on a moment-to-moment basis so quickly that you might not even really recognize that you're making them. In a board game, these decision points are much more granular. You likely have turns, and who wins and loses is determined by what happens during those turns. Sometimes this type of game attempts to spackle over the lack of options for players by giving them occasional small choices. Go left or go right. Do you want to do this or not? But these choices also have to be meaningful. There can't be one obvious best choice. And even if you have choices, if a game comes down solely to luck, it's a bad game design. My dislike of this genre of the game comes from the fact that for a very long time, this is what people thought board games were. Roll, move that number of spaces, something random happens. A lot of these games were following in the footsteps of the game of life. The Milton Bradley board game that's poked around for a while, but really came into its modern iteration in the 60s. And the concept was that the board game represented life. You spun, random things happened to you. You get married and had children because that's what you're supposed to do. And then at the end of the game, you're either rich or you gamble it all on one spin of the wheel. This version of life was released in Japan in the 80s, where it proved to be very popular. So popular that they made a video game version for the PC Engine. But for some reason, they didn't use the title. They called it Yuuyuu Jinsei instead. That makes Yuuyuu Jinsei the first official video game based on the game of life. And it is a very accurate recreation. Okay, the board isn't laid out exactly the same. As far as I can tell, the spaces are. The game is all here. On every turn, you take a spin, move that many spaces, and then do the thing that's written there. When you start, you get your choice of going straight to work or going to school instead. You always go to school because any of the career options are worth far more money than a 5-space head start. Early on, you're prompted if you want to buy any kinds of insurance, and you always do because the small fee for the insurance is way less than any potential damages that you'll have, and the fee for buying all of that insurance might be 0.5% of your final total. If you land on the correct spaces, you can gamble. The return on those is much better than the losses, so you might as well do it. And then when you reach the end of the game, if you're not in first, then you might as well spin the wheel for a 1 in 10 chance of automatically winning. There really is nothing more than luck here. In the game I played, the person who won robbed me 3 times for $100,000 with each take, and since when they reached the end of the game they had $400,000 to my $200,000, the luck of him constantly hitting those spaces and me constantly missing them was the entire outcome of the game. The third player that I set up in the game wound up so far behind on the track just by random chance that I had to sit around for about 5 minutes as they just took turn after turn so that I could see the final scores. Yuuyuu Jinsei supports up to 5 players using the multi-tap, but if you don't have the multi-tap, you can just swap the controller around. There's a few Easter eggs included in the game. When you power the game on, press and hold select, then press run. Then at the name entry screen, hold run and press select to reset the game. Finally, press and hold select again, then hit run. Now all the character portraits are swapped out for wackier ones. Not sure it's really a good thing when all of the regular character portraits are white people, and the wacky portraits are where you find people of other ethnicities. The other Easter egg is a way to actually make this fun. When you're about to spin for your turn, press select, then hold down buttons 1, 2, and run, and press select again. That launches this game, which looks an awful lot like Buster Brothers. It's not Buster Brothers, though. The arcade game Buster Brothers didn't exist until 1989. This is actually a port of Hudson's 1983 MSX game Cannonball. Don't worry, Buster Brothers isn't a copy. They actually licensed Cannonball for their version. You have infinite lives in this version of Cannonball, so you just play until you get tired of it and turn the system off. There's also no points, so it's not like you can try for a high score. Yuuyuu Jinsei seems to be kind of liked in Japan, though I was pleased to find modern Japanese players complaining about the shallowness of the game of life. And as I said, this is the exact kind of game that I despise. If I turned on auto fire and stuck a rubber band around the controller, it would have the exact same outcome on the result of the game as if I sat there playing the whole time. I can't even say that I found it to be visually interesting. The events all use a lot of the same backdrops. There isn't even a comedic tone that you find in some of these games. The most you get are weird things flying overhead while you drive around the map. There is nothing in Yuuyuu Jinsei that is worth playing. The only thing this one has going for it are its historical connections.